Hello and welcome, my name is Jane. In this video I'm going to be talking about whether or not FFG do a good job of balancing Star Wars Legion. Now, first thing I want to say right at the gate, I think the answer to that is mostly yes, but I think the bits where they fail, or where there are like key points of imbalance, are perhaps problematic for the community, and that's really what I want to talk about today. Again, secondly, I also have no problem with people who pick the best list. I think that's completely reasonable and I've got no qualms with that. So let's go. Let's start. So what am I talking about? I think FFG do a reasonably good job, but I don't think most people would disagree if you play at a competitive level that there have been some list archetypes, if you want to call them that have just been better than the rest of either the rest of the game or the rest of that particular faction. So one example would be Luke Leia was obviously fantastic for a long time. Boba Fett's was pretty good. Triple Tauntauns is one that immediately springs to mind. And let's say now, I was watching Ellis's video, talking to Ellis a little bit as well, and others. He's made a video talking about how he thinks basically the Galactic Republic essentially is the better faction, and that's being shown in the Invader League that's going on now on TTS, etc. I have personally not played for a little while, so I don't necessarily, because of coronavirus, so I don't necessarily want to comment particularly if that's the case, but the top players seem to be playing that faction, and for me that's always an indication of what's best. If the top players are playing it, they have likely, concluded that that's the best, and who else is going to have the better opinion there? If you ask me, my opinion doesn't really count. It's not as valuable as the best players playing it. Probably one reason why the best players end up playtesting stuff, but that's another issue. So, yeah, I think we can mostly agree that there have been some key points of imbalance right at the top end, at least. There has been stuff at the bottom end, like the Airspeeder was sort of like a meme in the community for a little while. But yeah, there's been problems, and there may even still be a problem because we had Shore Troopers, and then we've had now the Galactic Republic. So there are still examples. I think at the Europeans it was like 7 and 8 either had triple Tauntauns or 2 Shore Troopers. But maybe they might have had 2 Tauntauns. Don't get hung up on my examples because I may not be remembering correctly, but I think it's almost undeniable that there are obviously things that aren't balanced, right? Because they generally get fixed, whether they get fixed by rule changes in the case of Tauntauns and Shore Troopers. I say fixed, nerfed, not necessarily fixed. Fixed implies that there is no problem, and I'm not here to make that claim. But they get nerfed by rule changes, or they get nerfed or changed by points changes. So points changes, things go down, like the speeder bikes for the Imperials went down in points because they weren't getting used that much. And things have gone up, etc. Have things ever gone up? I don't know if things have actually ever gone up. Anyway, either way. So my main problem here is that, yes, it's twofold. One, I don't personally think that having a points change every year is good enough to fix things. I think it's too long of a gap, basically, and things are too good for too long. And so at the minute, the points change are getting changed about every September, we think. They didn't change points to fix to nerf Tauntauns and Shore Troopers. What they did is they updated the rules. And then now updating the rules is fine, but perhaps it can't go enough sometimes to really correct things. And rule changes happen more than every I don't know, probably every 4-5 months, something like that. It's hard to really say. But yeah, so you've got rules changes and points changes that are ways of correcting the balance of the game. And these are mainly used for competitive. So if you play just for fun, then just continue using the cards, what's written on the cards. You'll be mostly okay. You only ever jump to the competitive thing if you've got one player who's like, no, I'm going to run with my triple Tauntauns anyway and destroy you. And you're like, okay, well, if you're going to do that, we'll actually have to play by the updated rules. So if you're playing for fun, just do whatever you want. But the minute you start trying to take the game more seriously and want to play at a competitive level, which I think most people do, because even at a fun level, I think you want the game to be balanced, right? You don't want to be playing rock, paper, scissors where you can only do rock. It wouldn't make any sense. So, so I think for me, they need to update the game perhaps a little bit more frequently. And that's partly because what will happen is the best players will pick the best lists. And you'll go to events, and people like me who, I'm going to go to an event, but I'm never going to win an event, right? I'm going to go to the event, and I'm going to get beat by the better player with a better list. Now, I hopefully am sensible enough to be able to recognise that the player is both better than me and the list is better than what I'm taking. So I'll be like, that's fine. But even me in that situation, you're like, well, I wonder how close the game would have been if the lists were equal. And the reason I'm saying my list is going to be crap at the minute, I'm running the I was trying to collect all 4 factions, but I thought, well, that's unreasonable for most people, so I'm actually just going to collect the Imperials, right? I'm just collecting the Imperials, and the Imperials are probably right at the bottom. So, depending, it's not that like cut and dry, but just bear with me. Let's say I'm taking a bad list, but let's say I'm a mid-table kind of player. I play against a good player with a really good list. Well, I get beat. What? And I'm trying to analyze it. Well, I'm like, oh. I'll look at the things that he did better than me, sure, but it's like, yeah, but he's fucking the gun line. It's a bit good, that, isn't it? Like, do you know what I mean? People won't necessarily be able to differentiate it, and I've got no qualms with the best people running the best list. I think that's completely understandable, and I think most people who go to tournaments who aren't trying to win will just take decent lists. But you want your decent list to compete against the better lists. Because, well, in actual fact, you don't want there to be that much of a difference between the lists, do you? You want everything to be balanced so that you can take anything and that the skill is involved. But I don't think that's actually a reasonable prospect because, one, if something is slightly better than something else, well, it makes sense to min-max that. That's just by default. And the problem here is that with 4 factions, you have this thing where it's sort of, it's within reach to try and collect them all. Like, if I really wanted to, I could buy a core set, buy maybe 3 units of phase 2, well, I couldn't because they're not in stock, but 3 units of phase 2 clone troopers, and I've sort of got that best list. Do you know what I mean? And maybe I'd need Rex. So it's within reach, and if I was going to a tournament and I wanted to do well, the question is, do I drop my Imperials and try and claim this best list? Oh, all right, that's one example. But let's say 3 months ago, everybody wanted, well, not 3 months ago, whatever it was, 5 months ago, everybody wanted triple Tauntauns. Well, it's like, oh, well, do I buy 3 Tauntauns and make that list with my rebels that I've got from my core sets originally? It's like, it's, at the minute, everything's within reach. And I think that's creating for, I think some people, especially like, for example, me, I think that could create in a situation where you're like, you're never quite comfortable, and there's a bit of a temptation to buy everything, which I think is inherent in wargaming as a whole. But I think specifically when we have these flashpoints of imbalance, that you have a situation where it becomes more and more tempting to try and pick the best list. And I think, how do you solve that? Let's talk about how you solve that. If you agree with me that well, the flashpoints of imbalance are obviously a problem because the game isn't purely perfectly balanced. And I'm never asking for a perfectly balanced game. I think that's unrealistic, impossible. And I think FFG probably do the best job out of any other wargaming company. Not naming any other names. Games Workshop. It's just come on all of a sudden, that cough there. No corona, I hope. So, you know, I think FFG do the best job of balancing than other games, but I think because of the newness of the game and the fact that these factions are sort of attainable, it could cause a bit of a division in the community, basically, for people who actually go to tournaments. Because you want a tournament to have 30 people. Now, not all 30 people are going to be playing the best lists. Like, that's not going to happen. Maybe 10 people will be playing the best lists. That maybe 10 people will be playing average lists and 10 people will be playing whatever, I don't give a crap list, right? And this you could imagine if the best lists with the best players are just like miles ahead, it's inevitably going to extend the differential in those games, right? Which is probably good because we've got MLV and stuff like that now. But for me, you don't want the vastness in the list. You don't want the list to really be impacting the game that much. Now you sort of do, because I think there is a skill in list building to some extent, especially when things are new, because you have to figure out what's good and what's bad. But you know, there is a skill to list building, and there's a skill to I don't even know how to phrase this, like list archetype concepts. Like, am I going to have a gun line? Am I going to have a fast moving force? Am I going to have a commander based thing? Like, you know, little like what they in the competitive world they may call that tech. What tech are they using? You know, like what's your strategy or your plan or whatever like that. So there is some skill there, and I'm not saying to remove that completely at all, because I don't think you ever could, and it should still remain. But it's when the tech is obviously so much better than other stuff, I think it causes a problem. So the solution, as I said, probably I would like to see punch changes perhaps move to once every 6 months, right? And I think what you should do when things are really good, you should probably nerf them or fix them or correct them a little bit quicker than you would for things that are really bad. So the things that are really bad, I think it's okay to like slowly buff them. Just buff them, see where they fit in. Do they go up? No. Buff them some more. Do they go up? No. Just like incremental buffs. But things that are really like top end, I think you should sort of very quickly nerf them down. At least in his video in Legion Command, he was talking about the power creep, and it does seem to be perhaps a thing, but the way to resolve a power creep isn't to buff everything else from the bottom up, because then you just have like an arms race. If anything, you should be buffing things, you should be nerfing things down. Well, in my opinion, you should be nerfing things down to like a base level. And the quicker you do that, the less pressure there is to get those other factions. Now, obviously, FFG probably at the minute are like, we don't necessarily mind if you want all 4 factions, we don't mind. Ooh. But I think ultimately you could end up creating like rifts in, not just, I don't want to say the community, because the community will survive. People are very friendly, nice and stuff like that, but you'll have rifts in people's like mindsets and mentalities. Like if you are an average player, you don't have 3 tauntauns, you've not bought 3 units of phase 2 troopers. You're an average player. You can maybe get a game in every month with a friend or something, but you want to go to a tournament to experience like a tournament, play some games, maybe the London GT or something like that. You want to go a big tournament. You don't want to go thinking, well, I'm definitely not going to win here because my list is not good enough. You want to go because I want to go to an event and be like, I'm definitely not going to win because I'm not good enough. Like that's the key thing. And I think with these like flashpoints of imbalance, that might not happen as much. Like, am I going to go, like, did I want to go to Europeans in the UK when I didn't have triple tauntauns? I didn't have shore troopers. I had a crap Imperial list. It was like, nah. The actual reason I didn't go is because my wife was heavily pregnant. But, could I even have been bothered with that? Could I have done well? Yeah, possibly, if I was good enough, but quite frankly, I'm not. You want that level playing field, but you don't want to feel like you've got to spend the money to keep up with the meta, basically. I think essentially, if you have an 800-point list that has like a reasonable strategy behind it, that list should always remain competitive. Should always be able to win games with it. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I think things get superseded. And I think the main problem then is that they don't necessarily get fixed quickly enough, so that there's always people who are like, well, if I paint up my triple tauntauns, they're going to be decent for 5 months. That's a worthwhile investment to some people, not to others. So yeah, long video. I'm not really sure what I said. Do FFG balance the game reasonably well? I think mostly yes. I think the middle part of the balance is pretty damn good. I think there are these peak moments of badness. There are peak moments of goodness, or like things that are better than other things, which are bad, I guess. And then there's peak numbers of bad units, which again are also bad. But there's peaks, and the bottom end is less of an issue, because generally if things were started in this middle, they'll only ever slowly like trend to the bottom. Whereas things that are just started out at the bottom should get slightly buffed to get in the middle, and things that are at the top, I think you should probably get a little bit more drastic with them. So people don't have an expectation that the best thing that, like, people shouldn't buy things because they're good, like in game. Do you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't have to buy 6 Stormtrooper upgrades because one upgrade is better than the rest. Like, that's nobody wants to feel like that. I think you want to buy things because you like the models, because you like the play style. You don't want to think, well, I'm buying this because I want to win. I think that sums up what I'm trying to say. And I think the only way you can do that is if you fix the top end imbalance quicker. That's what I'm saying. Hopefully I've said it eloquently enough. I'm not really sure. It felt like a ramble. I do hope you have the most beautiful day. Goodbye.